Welcome to the show. We are excited to be here.
Two drink maximum.
The show over. 2 drinks and nothing more.
We're back. Not like we ever left.
We're
back.
Well, every day we go home and then we come back and we do another show.
You do.
Today we have a wonderful guest, friend of the show, Keenan Hiett, editor extraordinaire here in Hollywood, California. So Keenan, our very first question, what are we drinking and why do we pick it?
Sure, yeah. Tonight we are drinking Shiner Bock.
Yeah.
It is, I feel like at a certain point it was pretty regionally specific to Texas. It has since widened out a little bit.
It is. I was going to say, I immediately go back to Texas when I taste it.
Yeah, no, that's kind of the thing is it reminds me of home.
Is it unfair to say this is Texas in a glass for you?
I feel like that's a strong statement. I'm not sure if I want to speak for the whole of Texas.
For you, just mean for you.
For me, yeah. For me personally, yeah.
Nice.
Shiner and all their varieties, I think, are there's a warmth to them. You know?
There's nobody at this table who is not very familiar with Shiner. So
That's
cheers.
amazing.
Yeah, cheers, guys.
Let's try it.
Yeah,
Ooh, nice.
I like it.
Very good. Shiner Bock is an incrable beer. If you haven't had it.
It is. It's one of the best, is it darker beer? A Bock is a dark beer.
Sure.
Right?
More, what is it? More malty than hoppy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm also someone that likes IPAs, but this is probably the best dark beer that I've ever had.
Sure.
And just the immediate memories that
But
come flooding in.
Is it because we're attached to Texas that we feel that way?
Very
Or
probably.
do you feel like there's
If we were from the Northeast, it'd be Leinenkugels or something like
Sure,
that.
right.
Schlitz or
All the
something
same,
like
I do
that.
think Shiner stands up, I feel like.
No, I know, but on its own, it's an incredible beer. Not only because we're all from Texas here, but also when I lived in San Antonio when I was a kid, we had a neighbor who was the marketing guy for Shiner.
Nice.
So he would give us. I had a basketball hoop in my driveway that was a Shiner Bock basketball hoop.
Right.
I was about to say, did he give children a bunch of beer?
No, he never did. But there was all sorts of Shiner Bock swag that he would give out all the time.
Sure. Awesome.
And so
It's
I
not
still
far from
think
there,
in my
right?
attic. You say what?
It's not far from there, right?
No, not at all. It's probably like a 30-minute drive from San Antonio, so
Nice,
it's not
yeah.
so bad. But yeah, it's a good beer. So Keenan, thank you so much for coming on the
Thanks
show
for
to
having
do
me,
this
guys.
with us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Chase was not kidding. You are an editor extraordinaire.
Yes.
We've known this for quite some time because we've known each other for quite some time.
Yeah.
Walk us through the kind of the SparkNotes version of you moved to Los Angeles and you're now, you're working on huge projects. What was kind of your first foot in the door of working on something that was like, oh, people have heard about this, or how did you get in?
So I came out here in 2010.
Okay.
I went to school for a little bit, a small post-production school in Burbank. And from there had kind of, in order to get into the union, you have to have a certain number of hours. So
Sure.
the game at that point is to kind of amass those hours
Get
best
the hours,
you can.
yeah.
Depending on the path, that's not for everybody. But to get into union stuff, so, we worked, Chase and I worked on a project together for a little while, which is where I ended up getting a lot of my union hours. Started off as a DIT with that show. Ended up staying on to edit with them. And from there, a connection I had made invited me to come interview for an assistant editor job on New Girl.
Wow.
So it was just sort of a relationship I'd made that somebody I'd stayed in touch with for a couple of years, and it all kind of came together at a certain point. I had the hours, I had the time, and it worked out.
What was that very first day walking into New Girl like?
Surreal. It's a different tier. You go onto the lot, and it's the craft services side of things alone is a big shift. I feel like
Good food, yeah.
But yeah, I remember going in and they walked me into an office and said, "This is yours." And there's like a door that shuts and a window that looks out onto the Fox lot, and I'm like, Is that?
Yeah.
This is
truly, you can't be serious. This is not
real,
my
yeah.
office.
No,
Yeah.
and it was great. It was a big shift, but the imposter syndrome side of things is definitely a part of those first few,
For sure.
or actually maybe still even, but yeah, no,
if you still have it, you shouldn't anymore, my friend.
sure.
Yeah.
But you don't, it's one of those things you get opportunities now and then out here, and catching on to them and grabbing a hold of that stuff is sort of the make or break side of it. So
Sure.
So what would be the primary difference between your job as an assistant editor and the lead editor on a network show like that? As far as duties and responsibilities.
So assistant editing is a lot more technical. You're dealing with sort of the intake of footage on a day-to-day basis and the project management side of things, however the editor prefers things to be set up. You're structuring that side. Then once things lock, you're responsible for delivering all of the different pieces to the different vendors who are doing your sound and your color and your VFX and all that. So you're managing a lot more technical elements of the post process. With the editing side of things, obviously you're a lot more creative. You're doing a lot more of the actual, you're making those decisions, you're making those choices for the show. So, they're different muscles. As an assistant, you get chances to, cut scenes, or a real benefit of being an assistant is that you get to kind of see things from the jump. You see them assembled and just how they were on the page, and then you get to watch that process go through, weeks, if not months of scrutiny and kind of figuring out what works and what doesn't work. So you get to see it firsthand, and usually you're outputting cuts to post for internal producers or out to studio, but you have to watch those every time they go out. So you're watching an episode just with the output stuff. You're watching an episode 7 or 8 times minimum, usually, in the process. So, it gives you a chance to really see, okay, this wasn't working, and this is how they fixed it. And
so working on a show like New Girl, what is it like working inside that environment where you have a network TV show that has to go to air in like 2 weeks and they're still filming?
Sure. That is not something that I deal with a lot these days. Working with streamers, that is it's a very different environment. Usually you're delivering 10 episodes or 8 episodes, and then they air them later on. But with network, obviously being up against it, it's a lot more intense, and you're cutting down to a more finite time. 21 minutes, 30 seconds is usually roughly the mark. So not only are you up against air dates and have things that need to go, but also you're beholden to a much more limited schedule. So yeah, it's a very, it's a much more intense environment, but I think that kind of pushes, the urgency around it makes work well under pressure, kind of. Yeah. That was terribly worded. Sorry.
I get it.
Creative accidents happen on limited time frames.
Sure. No, I think once you kind of get into that cram phase of things, and I think the hours are usually a little longer in a lot of those network situations too, which can be intense. But I think it's productive given the show, but it can be a productive kind of pressure.
Yeah, that motivation of
sure
something's got to be on TV.
Right.
For anyone listening who is not really familiar with how television production works, I mean, every show has a little bit of a different schedule, but there's got to be some similarity, I imagine, across especially network television. What could you explain to folks, generally speaking, how far are you ahead of air date, right? So say you were working on an episode of New Girl and you got it essentially locked and you're sending it out to a vendor for color and sound. When was that date versus how many weeks out before it hit television and the public got a chance to see it?
From the last day of production, it's about 6 weeks.
Okay.
Roughly. And that varies. I think sometimes there's pickups and there's, actors have schedule conflicts and they can't shoot till certain times. So we've definitely been in situations where we were getting things in the week before. But, most post producers would probably shudder at that. And that makes the tension and the stress of that schedule a lot more, chaotic with those pieces out. So, it would be anywhere from 6 weeks, end of production, 6 weeks to air. And usually you're locking 2 weeks-ish before air in a lot of cases. So now, obviously, I think, there's usually like 3 months of onboarding time with streaming networks.
Right.
So you're finishing a show and then you go on and usually you can finish another show before that one ever makes it back out to air.
Yeah, that was my next question, was the difference between network TV and the streamers. It sounds like they just have so much more time as far as to perfect the product.
It's a lot more relaxed, which can be a good thing. I think, it's almost kind of surreal coming from a network background to have the time we have on some of these shows.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's helpful. You can kind of let things breathe, and as much as the pressure can help create fun things, and the time you take with that is also as productive, in another vein.
Yeah, there's 2 different outlets to creativity, right? There's that pressure cooker where it's like we have to come up with a solution because at 10 p.m. we owe this producer a cut and we got to figure it out.
Right.
Versus I have all the time in the world and I'll figure out something. And it's just they can both be excellent solutions, but they're driven by 2 different results.
That first one is where every writer in the world lives.
Yeah,
it's due tomorrow.
Yeah,
gotta get it done now.
No, I feel like I'm the same way. I think I like the deadline side of things, and it's giving us more space. There are times where the brunt of the work, the most of the work, comes in closer to the deadline, just because that's sort of the flow that I'm used to, I guess, with things. But it's to each their own.
Right, exactly.
In terms of what works.
Now that it seems like you work on a lot more streaming shows just because that's the way that television seems to be going, do the shows ever finish so far in advance that by the time they get around to airing, and if you choose to check it out, is it like a refresher? You're like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Oh, that was a fun little, or is it still baked in your memory where it's like, oh man, I remember this was a tough cut?
No, space is good.
Yeah,
I like space. I like space. I think shows like New Girl were kind of easy because that was an every week thing, and it was there's 3 editing teams usually working, so you've got kind of a situation where you're seeing a third of the season yourself. You're obviously in the office, you can watch other episodes, whatever, but I tended to stay away from those and kind of looked forward to air dates, even if it was my own episode and I knew it was coming. But yeah, the space side of things now, it's a lot easier, I think, to watch stuff without, because there's usually a lot of there's some visceral memories of things that happened during production that can get in the way of so it's nice to have a little time and watch things as a fan as opposed to being in it still.
For sure. And all those little like frame fidgeting things that you're doing, like hopefully by that time you're like, oh, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Sure. Some of them stay with you. Some of them are
forever. Yeah.
Permanent. Yeah. Keep you up at night.
I think everybody who works in this industry has like at least one like episode or one title that it's like, I can never enjoy this one again. Like
Sure, right?
I know the blood, sweat, and tears that went into it and I just can't enjoy it
Everything
anymore.
I've ever made.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, New Girl was a phenomenon onto its own, where it's like that show just kind of really took on a life of its own. Did it become popular because people started watching it on network television, or did it get a streaming bump because it made its way to Hulu or Netflix or something like that?
I think it became popular because of their star assistant editor, first of all.
Well, sure, yes. That's why I watched the show.
One of one. No, I think it's interesting. I feel like it kind of had a 2 separate lives, really.
Yeah.
I think when it was airing, it had enough of an audience that it was kind of like a water cooler conversation the next day for a lot of people. And it was, it had its place at that time. And I think it's now kind of become a show that you can sort of just put on and fold your laundry to. But also, I think, the rewatching thing and being able to go through the show the way you can now has definitely given it a different form. I mean, that the subreddit for that show is wildly active.
Right. Still, right?
Probably more active than when the show was airing.
Right.
So it's an interesting thing to kind of see it have a life after it ended.
Yeah, because a lot of those shows, and New Girl is one of them, these types of sitcoms where, especially shows that take place in a limited range of locations, they become comfort food for people, right? Like you said, it's a show that you can put on with your laundry, but it's like, it also becomes a show that, like, because you know the characters and you can almost just kind of listen to it, it becomes a show that it's like, it can relax you, it can soothe you when you watch it. And like, and a show like that never really, like, that never changes. You know what I mean? A show from the 90s can do that. A show from the 80s can do that. So you got to put your fingerprint on something that is going to impact dozens of thousands of viewers like worldwide forever, because that's how good the show is. Small fingerprint, but your fingerprint's on there nonetheless.
It is, for sure. Yeah, no, I mean, there's like there was a offline edit thing we did for an episode where Nick is doing something for Jess's birthday, and there's a movie theater where he's got this whole thing rented out and all our friends are there, whatever. And the task in the offline, what we were doing was to make something that Nick Miller would make. So obviously something that was a little less.
So kind of slapdash or whatever. Yeah.
So I threw something together that was what I felt like was in that vein, and it stayed in the show, made it to air, and so now when that goes, like, that kind of thing. So there's little pieces like that, and that's sort of that's kind of the upper tier of contributions that assistant. Songs are another one too. Like when you get a song all the way through is kind of a fun thing. But yeah, I mean that there's stuff like that in there that's definitely fun to kind of.
Please tell me that somewhere, like in the hard drives of Fox, there's like a secret edit of just all the footage that Prince shot for that one episode he was on the show.
I mean, I would imagine that was a.
Did you get to meet Prince?
I was at the mansion when they shot that night. We did go out there. All the post team. We don't go to set that often, but we that was obviously an occasion.
I'd like to go.
Yeah. So that was a cool night. But no, I didn't get to meet him. No, I was in his space enough to say that I get it.
You get
saw
it.
his aura or whatever.
Yeah. No, I've seen
vibe.
it with my own eyes.
The Prince vibe is real.
Yeah.
So, I mean, New Girl ends because it went on 8 seasons, 9 seasons?
7.
7 seasons. Okay. And then you've moved on to some other things, but one of the most delightful surprises I've seen in the last couple of years is you worked on the show Reboot on Hulu, which was incredible. I loved that show. It was such a great show. It was such a good concept.
Yeah.
Like, it's a show that was so high concept, it could either fall on either side of the fence, like this could be stupid or it could be really funny. And I think you
We walked
edited
through
most of
that
the episodes,
line.
and but it worked tremendously. And I think you edited most of those episodes, right?
I not most. I had a shared credit on the premiere, and then I had I think three others.
Okay.
I think, if I remember right, of the 8.
Okay,
So half-ish.
that was cool. Yeah,
Maybe more. I could. Yeah.
it's been a while, right? Because
Right.
it came out in 2022.
Yes,
I
it was
think,
last
yeah.
year. Yeah.
And for those of you who are listening and are curious to know what Keenan looks like,
You're also in it.
you actually made a cameo
I
in
am
the show in the
briefly-
final
Guest star.
episode. Yeah,
Right.
my wife and I literally almost fell off our couch when
Yeah.
Paul Reiser's character addresses you as Keenan.
By name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're like, oh
That
my
was an
God, there
on-set
he is.
change too. I can't remember what the name was. It was like Tyler or something.
Really?
And they changed it that day, and that's a surreal.
Did they
thing
run
to
in and
have
be like,
happen.
we need a shot of an editor?
No, they came and asked me ahead of time, and it was a non-speaking. It was a very.
You gave
it was
an
way
amazing
more
nod.
low stakes. Yeah. It was that was method. I was very
was incredible.
I was actually out of the bay.
Did you
into
practice
the
the
fake
nod?
bay and then back to my bay shortly after?
Yeah.
I did practice the nod.
How many different nods do you go through?
I had 3 or 4 that I thought were good. 2 made it on, and I ended up obviously picking the one that I did. So none of that is
The
true.
best one?
You had me going though. I was like, he really did work on some nods.
No.
Good for him.
No,
Just you in the mirror, just
none
like
of it
up and
matters.
down?
I mean, none of it in that moment. There's 3 cameras on you. Paul Reiser's behind you, and I didn't start in post production because I like being in front of cameras.
Right,
So
right,
I was.
yeah.
It was tense for me, anyways.
Yeah, but that's cool though. You got to share a moment with Paul Reiser.
Yeah. And I'm sure he remembers it. I bet he's still thinking about it.
I'm sure he's still
Yeah.
thinking about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
Dan,
Wrote in
for
his
sure.
journal, wonderful day with Keenan on
Sure.
set today.
Yeah.
Well, in a world where
Best nod I've ever seen in my life.
yeah, yeah, he's got that in his little black book. If I ever need a professional nodder
Pro
or
nod.
editor, but mainly nodder, I'll call Keenan. In a world where nothing ever goes away forever, and it seems like shows in the best way possible now are so incestuous, where they'll start on one network and they'll go to another. I was disappointed to hear that Hulu didn't pick that show up for second season, but you never know. It hasn't been that long. Maybe it's going to come back for second season.
Sure, this is not my place in any way, but I have the nice thing about that show is there's a lot of meta stuff you can do with the next season in terms of
Yeah.
where that show goes from in that world. Obviously, Hulu buys an old show, brings it back, whatever. But it's the idea, that you could build a lot of what's happening right now in the industry into
Yeah.
that show. And I would like to think that there's a chance for it. I think most shows that get canceled, especially ones you're on, you feel like you'd like to see them.
Nothing ever really gets canceled anymore.
Sure.
And given the long enough period of time, at some point an audience will find the
Yeah.
thing again.
No, you're right. I
And
mean,
start
it's-
yelling at it and bring it back.
Right. Yeah. No, it's there's like that faint bit of hope with a lot of things that when they end, it's like maybe there's a chance to bring this somewhere. But yeah, it's for the time being
Yeah.
no longer with
So
us.
to deviate from the meta part of editing, get a little bit technical on it. What makes a good scene when you're editing, cutting, like going from the script to what's been shot into the scenes? Because I know we've had discussions about Walter Murch's book as far as like editing theory.
Legendary editor.
Amazing.
Walter Murch, yeah.
Best book I've ever read on editing. The only
Have
book
you read
I've
a lot
ever
of books?
on-
Yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah.
that's a tricky question.
It's a loaded question for
Yeah,
sure.
no, I mean,
Little bit.
obviously there's a lot of subjectivity in there.
Yeah.
And I think that there is a part of specific, show to show, and even within that scene to scene. I usually try. Obviously, you've got the script, and most shows that's a pretty I mean, there's a lot of alts and things like that they do, but usually the script is a good place as a pat, but it's not absolute for me. Usually, it's kind of seeing what takes place in the footage and kind of building from there. Usually, like later takes are usually where I start when I'm watching dailies and going through things, just to kind of, because that's at that point you think they've
People got to warm up.
Yeah, no, I think that you're feeding off of what the actors there are giving you. A big part of editing is the feeling it gives you, and there's a part
The
of
gut feeling, you mean? Just watching
absolutely,
it back
yeah,
and knowing.
yeah.
like,
And there, that's with what we do, there's a lot of instinct involved, and
Yeah.
I think in terms of what makes a good scene or what you're working off of what you're given, and I think from there the build is kind of things tend to fall in place. Usually you're working with a very well written scene and great actors, and those kinds of things are very helpful pieces, but we kind of put it all together, and it's you kind of just it figures itself out as you go. But it is a lot of instinct, and it's a lot of kind of just working with what's in front of you.
Exactly. What happens when it doesn't work? That's where the editor really has to do all
Sure,
the
yeah.
effort.
I mean,
Well, the flip side of that question, or another way to phrase it, would be: is it possible to save a bad scene with good editing?
it's possible to save a bad performance.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of tricks we use and things that divert attention elsewhere, kind of. But yeah, no, I think once a scene is I mean, reshoots usually is the ultimate answer to that question, and that is what happens a lot of the time.
Is that a scary email to send to people?
Oh, it's not my email.
No?
No, yeah. No, that's above my pay grade. But you are part of those decisions, and I think those things, it's kind of, when you get into those moments, I think some of those can be kind of fun too, because it's, working with producers or director, whomever, you got to kind of figure out, and that's the part of editing that I think appeals to me the most, is that the puzzle side of it is there throughout. But it's fixing those things, it's fixing those problems, and figuring out ways to make whatever the intent was here, despite what you have to work with, to make those things work. And that part of it, I think, is what's really most enjoyable for me.
The puzzle solving aspect.
Absolutely,
of it for you. Yeah. That's neat. So, like, without getting too specific, like, can you give us one little trick or whatever that it's like, if there is a bad performance, like what would be a hallmark edit?
What's your go-to maneuver to see?
Not yours, but just like if you saw this in a show, what would be the tip off for you? Like, maybe that was a bad take and they're cutting around it.
Yeah, and we do a lot of things like there's tricks that we use sometimes in terms of matching continuity and things like that, where we will cut a frame in half, and the left side of the frame will be one take and the right side of the frame will be another.
Sure.
So there's things like that where if you've got a take where one actor in a two shot, one actor gives you a line and you want a read from another take.
Right.
For the other actor, that there's a way that we'll kind of layer things in that will look like it's the same shot. So you can kind of save what was a good take for one actor here and a good take on another actor here. You can kind of fuse those things together. So we have a lot of stuff like that. There's a lot of there's, I probably shouldn't go any further into some of those things, but yeah, no, there's a lot of really good
movie magic happens sometimes.
Yeah, no, there is a magic to it.
I hear that Fincher is the king of that, where it's like he will literally like CG splice.
Oh, for sure.
Like a two shot.
It's a whole art form.
It's a
it really
exactly.
is. Yeah, no, it's fun. It's that's getting back to the problem solving. The puzzle side of this is the exact frame that you have for a specific shot is not all you have to work with.
Right.
There's always more ways to kind of adjust, and sometimes there are things that will stick you into places and you get stuck. But yeah, I mean there's a lot of creative problem solving solutions that we can kind of tinker with to make things work.
You got a bunch of tools in the utility belt that you can kind of
yeah.
It sounds like you have to be an incredibly positive person to jump into an edit bay.
Well,
and be like there is a way to fix this.
Yeah, you have to be an open person, I think, and a lot of times those solutions aren't exactly what you go in with the intent for things to be. And I think sometimes it's easier to live with those where things end up than others, but yeah, I think the openness is probably more important than the willingness, I guess, to try, different routes than what your first preconceived notion of a scene or of, so.
Right, because you might put it together and go, oh, this is like way different than I saw it in my head, and now it's the scene's leading me in a different direction.
Right,
yeah.
But you get those feelings that things are working. This is a good, this isn't what I intended, but it's working this way.
That
and
gut feeling
this
thing.
way. Right, and it's usually best practice. Once you've got that once, stay with it. Stop messing. That's the hard part about a lot of this too, is like knowing when
you're
to
done.
Stop. Right, right. I mean, there's things that have aired on TV that I still feel like I'm not done with. So, that's
it's a never-ending thing, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
I mean, you're far too young to be considered a like grizzled industry vet, but you've obviously worked on a bunch of different things. You cut your teeth coming up with in network television, which has its own very specific act structure and break structure. A sitcom is usually 21 minutes or 22 minutes, and then an hour-long show is like 40 minutes. In the streaming world, those time restrictions don't apply. There are no really commercial breaks.
Sure.
Do you feel like that was a huge adjustment for you, or is it like once you're editing a show, you kind of get the rhythm of that show specifically?
I think the reason this is a little bit tricky is because I don't build that structure. That structure is not something that's a foundation necessarily that I'm laying.
Right.
I think that there is what working off of a script and working off of what's given sort of informs what I do. There are a number of ingredients that all kind of come together, and final draft, I guess, of your script is sort of what we're doing in the edit bay. So that part of it is kind of built in, you know, and I think that there is an element of being on a network show where, especially with comedy, because your act breaks are usually punctuated with, you know, a blow to a scene that's going to get a laugh. Like it's kind of what you want to go out
It's
off
a button-er joke.
Right. And so without that in a comedy, you know, in a streaming format, you don't really have those kind of beats. You're sort of just, it's scene to scene. The flow is a little different, but it's, you know, you're interjecting a lot more pace into a show intentionally with that kind of format. Whereas with network and with commercial breaks, those beats are already kind of punctuated there for you. So you have more room to play with it, I guess, with streaming than you would with network.
Right.
Has that been more enjoyable or less enjoyable?
I don't know. I mean, both kind of serve their purpose. Both are kind of, you know, having established myself with a network show and New Girl being the one, I think that's sort of like home base. That's what I'm most comfortable with and what I've spent the most time. So, you know, I think that part of it is almost kind of nostalgic now that streaming has shifted things the way that it has. Having that device to work with is nice. But that's not to take anything away from, you know, I mean, it's all fun. It's all funny.
When you're filming for act breaks, you can just end a scene on a shot that you wouldn't, like, you can just cut to black, right? Because you're going to commercial and that's your little breather moment.
Sure.
On a streaming show, you have to find the perfect frame to transition to the next thing because there's no commercials and you have to keep going. And it's not worse. It's just a different level of pressure there's an off valve on a network show that gives you a minute to catch your breath and that just doesn't exist on an hour-long streaming show.
Right.
You know, so it presents its own separate set of challenges.
Sure. And I mean, it's keeping people engaged. And I think that part of, as a viewer, you're watching, you know, when the commercials come on, this is like a click off for most people. This is a disengage. With the streaming format, it's the intent is a lot more focused, I feel like, for us for that 30 minutes, 32 minutes, 28, whatever it ends up being, is kind of keeping the pace of those things so that you're not losing attention spans. Which is it's a different style of editing, a different style of presentation. So.
Absolutely. And while we're on keeping pace, I think we're about to the end of our first drink here.
I think so. I think we're going to need to take a network break here and then cut to commercial while we refill our beers. We'll be right back, everybody. Stay tuned. You know, Chase and I might be new to the podcast game, but we do know enough that the best podcast should be recorded in an environment that really kind of spurs your creativity. And we're lucky enough to record our podcast in the Muse Rooms, which is a creative co-working shared space that we are proud to have as a sponsor, and we could not be more excited.
Yeah, you can check out the Muse Rooms online to learn more about their services and the spaces they have here. Lots of really great stuff. That is themuserooms.com. That's M-U-S-E for Muse. You can also check them out on Instagram at the Muse Rooms. But have a look at it. There's tons of great amenities. It's a really wonderful environment, like you said, and it just goes a long way in making our show amazing.
Agreed. We couldn't be happier, and we think you might be too. So please check out the Muse Rooms, and we will see you there.
Yeah, and now for part 2.
We're back with Keenan Hiett and a fresh beer. So my first question back is, Keenan, your television habits specifically, are you more of a one-a-week type guy, or do you like binge-watching television?
I think I jumped on binging for a while, and there was a lot of, it's exciting to have everything all at once, I feel like. Sure. I have since kind of regressed back to a week-to-week.
Yeah.
Or at least spacing out episodes as much as I can anyways.
Yeah.
You know, certain shows, I think it's easier to digest. It's easier to, you know, and I kind of appreciate that some streaming models have the week-to-week release. I feel like that the conversation around it, the build-up around it, I think is more exciting.
I enjoy it. It factors in like the social element of entertainment a whole lot more than. Did you watch this entire season? Because most everybody's like, no, I got 5 other shows that I've got in line to watch every episode and then talk to you about it.
Oh, see, that's funny. I'm delighted to hear both of you say it, because it seems like, because I'm firmly week to week. I like week to week because I'm like, I don't have 10 hours to sit down and watch, like, you know, and you'll go into work now and it's like, oh yeah, I binged all of Stranger Things this weekend. It's like, what? Like, I had errands to run. What do you mean you binged all of it? Like, it's, you know what I mean? Like, I like the week to week because it's like, yeah, it gives you a chance to breathe and talk to people. Like, what do you think's going to happen next week? Not that there's anything wrong with binging, but like I like the week to week thing. That suits my schedule better.
It makes more of an event of it also, I feel like. You know, that you know, communal side of television is really nice. And I feel like when everybody's on different different episodes, or they're not starting the season yet. And then I have friends that'll let things stack up for a little while, like even a show that goes week to week. They're like, we're going to wait for a few to get. So there's all kinds of
I do. I like to have
approaches.
2 to 3 episodes of something.
See, that's
to watch at any moment.
Sure.
Yeah. Has your and I mean, you have a wife, you have a new daughter as of last year. Congratulations on that.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, especially with your daughter now, like has that forced your television watching habits to change just because you're
Not yet. No,
Not yet. Okay.
Not yet. No, I'm sure it will at some point.
She's still young enough
too,
that you
yeah.
can hold her and
Yeah.
like we're watching whatever I'm watching.
There's a few shows. She won't sit still long enough to watch anything right now, so we're not stuck in. But there's definitely some networking changes some programming changes rather that are going to happen. I think very soon.
You're gonna get real into Bluey and
Yeah.
Yeah.
We tried a couple of those. I'm on board with Bluey. Bluey
fair
seems
enough.
all right.
Yeah, fair enough. So your daughter is a future New Girl fan. We'll just mark her down firmly in that category.
Oh
Hopefully.
yeah. What's that day gonna feel like whenever you get to show
I
her
haven't
something
thought
that you've
about
made?
that. Yeah. I mean, that's a surreal thing.
You'll have to come back and let us know how that
Sure,
feeling
yeah,
goes.
I'll be here. Yeah,
Yeah,
10,
yeah.
15
10, 15
yeah.
years from now, yeah, we'll still be
Put it on our
going. We'll still
calendar.
be here
Yeah.
drinking Shiner Bock. We'll be good to go. Now, I mean, especially with the addition of your daughter and the fact you have a family, do you feel like that has affected maybe some of the gigs you choose to work on anymore? I mean, obviously that you were mentioning that intense network schedule. Is that something that you feel like would be a strain or would be a little bit difficult for you to accomplish now than it was when you
Sure.
were just Keenan the dude?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting part of interviewing is kind of talking about that, because there are most shows these days, most shows will try and wrap at a reasonable hour. Most everybody has families to get home to and all that.
Yeah.
But late nights are definitely a part of it, and I think that there is, again, kind of going back to earlier, there's a sort of nostalgia about those late nights now. Like they aren't as they're way fewer and further between at this point.
Sure.
But it's nice, that there's good work gets done in those later nights.
Yeah.
So I think the preference would be to be home at a reasonable hour.
Sure.
But yeah, I think it's kind of fun
Yeah.
sticking it in late. So
Those late nights,
That's
everybody
gotta be an
orders
edit.
pizza.
sticking it in late. I'm sorry.
Those late
You're
nights-
allowed to say sticking it in late.
Yeah.
We knew what you meant.
There's no
enough.
context
Yeah.
on it. It's just a word. It's just a phrase.
Yeah.
Getting
Yeah.
out like Groundhog Day on VHS.
Having a post-production sleepover there in the office doing work late into the wee hours of the morning.
Sure.
Have you ever actually met another editor that has like a really weird like ritual where it's like something like a baseball player where it's like, oh no, I do have like this in my office and I have to rub this statue's head, just something weird like that.
Of course, yeah. There's a lot of very particular,
Really?
setups for like the layout of a room or the height of a monitor or the distance of the monitor from the chair. Like I've met editors that are that kind of particular, and I've also met editors that are that prefer late nights, prefer working late. And I think a lot of post-production stuff, especially when you're getting into it, you do work. The overnight thing is not a foreign concept. So it's definitely ingrained, I feel like, with a lot of us to stick it in late. I almost got that,
Just stick it in late.
I almost got that clean for
You're
you.
just
Sorry.
going to keep saying it.
Trying to
Stick it
make
in
that a
late.
catchphrase. I dig it.
Never said that before in my life. I'm not sure why I've said it now twice.
Keenan Hiett, catchphrase, stick it in late.
Stick it in late.
Well, and is there, especially when you get to that level of editor status, right? And you kind of are the grand poobah on a particular episode. Do you feel like there's also an added responsibility of extracurricular activity of I got to keep up on the latest Avid specs and I got to make sure that I'm up, you know what I mean? Like, or is it really just like, no, that like I keep up on the theory of editing, right? Reading Walter Murch books, whatever, and all the technical stuff, people will assist me get to that point.
Sure. Yeah. I think there's a lot of, watching other shows, especially popular shows, but watching as much as you can, I think, is a very important part, new and old. And I think that there's a lot to be gained in terms of inspiration in that regard. I don't know if published books are necessarily the way to stay up on things, but I think that, the community side of post-production is really nice in terms of, show to show, you're usually working with different editors and different post people. And you get to spend a lot of time late nights and we're usually on 10 to 12 hour days as a minimum kind of thing. So you spend a lot of time with these people. And I think one of the fortunate things about like New Girl and the other shows that I was on as an assistant is that I was able to pick up a lot of those things and learn a lot of those tricks. And like I was saying, watching the editor's cut all the way through to a locked cut, there's a real evolution that you get to see. So in terms of learning and keeping up with things, and even Avid, to go back to that part of your question. A lot of us work on older versions of Avid and do so on purpose. Especially they've made a big shift with things in their recent version. I think 2 or 3 years ago, they kind of shifted their user interface to a point where I think there's a lot of people that will always stay at the version prior to that.
Yeah. Staring at a screen for 12 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours a day has got to be, I mean, it's got to be a little bit headache inducing. What do you like to do as soon as you leave the edit room? What do you like to do for fun? To kind of get your mind off of the editing stuff.
I play a lot of disc golf.
Nice.
I play a lot of disc golf.
Nice.
And we live in a part of the city that's very walkable, and we're big on that. We do a lot of walks at our house. So that's getting outside is definitely the counter balance to all that. Working from home, I guess, is a preface to that. That's why
that's
stepping
true,
out of the used to be stepping out of the bay, you're on a lot or you're on a an office building or whatever. But now being at home, we just kind of pop out, walk around for an hour, kind of just get away from everything. But it is, you do have to balance. There's a lot of strain your eyes, your body goes through sitting. And
are there a lot of disc golf courses in LA? I feel like they're hidden. They're not like golf courses where you just see them from the freeway. Like you got to seek them out.
Yeah, we have a.
I also play disc golf with Keenan
Chase
as well.
And I play together a bunch. Yeah. We have a quality over quantity kind of thing going on. We have some really great courses. We just don't have a whole lot of them.
Sure.
So it's definitely, there's enough variety around Los Angeles terrain and all of that that you can kind of mix it up and play a different course.
Sure.
It's a whole different feel than the one
the one they played last week or whatever.
Yeah.
Be honest,
there's 3 or 4 really good ones in the area that I don't know if we want to name them because we don't want to make them crazy popular. They're already very popular,
right?
Yeah,
for the sport as it is, but there are secret spots.
Yeah. Have you gotten to the point now in disc golf where at least one shot a day you're like, I ought to quit my day job? Like
No. I maybe have one round a year where I feel like I might have a shot at going pro.
Like I'm on fire.
And then I play again the next week and I'm quickly brought back down to earth.
I've had 2 shots the entire disc golf career that I'm like, I know what I'm doing.
Sure.
Every other throw, I'm like, nope, I shouldn't be out here.
Yeah. It's like because I'm not a disc golfer, but I do play golf, like regular golf. Every golf game,
ball golf.
Ball golf. That's,
It's worth specifying.
Yeah.
So we know which golf you're talking.
Exactly.
I've never heard it referred to as ball golf, and now it
There's
feels
ball golf and disc golf.
Yeah. But every time you play, there's one shot where you're like, I'm Tiger Woods. I could quit my job. 1 out of 100 shots, you feel that way. Yeah.
Disc golf is a lifelong meditation on how much frustration can you put yourself through and still have fun.
It's therapeutic. It is. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's you get to a point where you've got enough form and that side of your game is figured out. The mental part of it is what the real challenge is.
Just like ball golf.
Yeah.
Just
you got to
ball golf.
maintain the focus. And
Right.
I have to do the same action 18 times. Because if I do it perfect, it will be perfect.
Tweak it a little bit, you're done. So
your day's off.
Right.
Right.
Well,
might as well go home.
Whether you're playing with a disc or a ball, I think one of the joys of golf, because it's a sport that realistically you're playing against yourself, that's what makes it enjoyable. Is it's the pursuit of perfection, right? You can play it alone, and it's like I know it could be better. I'll be better next time, right? It's that never achievable goal of like I will be better eventually. You know, that's cool, and that's got it. Like honing those skills have to work into editing as well, where it's like I'm going to get better the more I do this.
Sure.
You know, I'm
Amazing tie-in.
Oh, I just
I'm proud of that one for you. That's a really good one.
Well, it's a little bit different than playing football or whatever, which is like, I just want to get smacked around, right?
Is that why you played football?
No,
2 days?
I played football in 7th grade and I was not good at it, and I summarily I quit.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
Fair
I
enough.
wish I was good. I'm a big dude. Like you'd think I'd be good at football, but I was like, even back then, I was like, I'm not giving up my knees for this. Like
That's
it's
a
not
fair-
happening.
Yeah.
Shane was built for track.
Yeah, or basketball. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm 6'5". Like I could probably play basketball if I was in better shape, but I don't think I have the coordination either.
There's a YMCA close to here. I'm sure we could
We'll get you on a team.
put this test to their.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we could just play 3-on-3. Yeah. Did you play any sports in high school? Were you on any teams?
I played soccer. In high
Soccer,
schow.
okay.
Yeah. And that was about the extent of it.
Because you wanted to, or because
Yeah.
you felt like I got to just do something?
No. I played growing up all the way through.
You're a tremendous
high
fan of the
school.
sport.
I am. I do keep up with it.
Who do you keep up with these days?
Oh, I don't know. I'm an Arsenal supporter, and then LAFC is my local club, as it were.
Yeah, because the thing about soccer, football to me, is that even though there are so many different clubs and they're very loyal to those clubs, it is a big tent sport where it just seems like the more fans, the merrier, right? Again, maybe there's vitriolic, factions in those teams, but if you're a soccer fan, it's like, okay, we're all family here at a certain point.
Kind of.
Yeah.
I don't know. Some of those lines are drawn and you stay on either side of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I hear you.
Who's, as an Arsenal fan, what's like the biggest, like the rival that you're like, oh, I spit on your grave?
I mean, it's interesting. I feel like the natural one is Tottenham, which is up the street from where Arsenal play. But not being from London, I don't that's obviously a rivalry because I've been watching long enough. But I feel like when I got into watching the English Premier League, there were other teams that were more irritating to me, and those are the teams that I have more of a
vitriolic,
a dislike.
Cheer against them a little bit harder.
So I mean, Tottenham obviously is that's part of being an Arsenal supporter. But yeah, there's definitely some other teams out there that I've got some ire for.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
To bring it a little bit back to editing, do you feel you would have pursued editing if we were still in the old school cutting film with a knife and tape days?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously I think that there is, I think having things presented the way they are in an edit bay today is a very different experience than what editing would have been on film. I think that figuring out the problem or solving a problem is still there inherently in it. And I think that part of it is what appeals to me the most. So, I mean, that maybe it's that it's old and kind of antiquated at this point, but that there's an appeal there to even learn how to do that. That would be a very cool thing.
Have you not gotten to do that before?
I have cut on an old moviola, but just for like shits and giggles, not like an actual
once
sure, just
college.
to see. Well,
it's the worst,
knew somebody.
but it's also awesome. Though.
Yeah, it is. It's. I mean, it's a real pain in the ass. And the workflow of all of that is obviously light years slower than what we do now. So. But there is kind of it's the vinyl to digital kind of conversation. There's something nice about the older way that things were done, or at least to be appreciated anyways. So.
Because the cuts were a little bit more definitive back in that era. Because, I mean, literally you were cutting it with a razor, and then if you messed that up, you had to tape it back, like splice it back. It's not just like undo a couple frames with a stroke of a keyboard. It's like you physically had to tape it back together.
Yeah, no, I mean, everything was very deliberate. And then not to say it's not now. We still kind of get into that nitty gritty with frames, but those choices were, there was a lot more to be done to undo a choice, like you're saying. So.
Yeah.
Did you have or do you have any editors that are like role models or inspirations?
I think working, so the supervising editor on New Girl, Steve Welch, working under him.
Shout out to Steve.
Yeah, Steve was great. Steve was, it's kind of an incredible person to be working next to for 6 years. No, 5 years, I think, with him. So that was I learned a lot, I think, from watching him and watching his cuts.
Because I know writers in the world, like will key on a specific writer they love, and people try and like model careers or styles after that. Yeah. But I don't know if the same thing translates into the editing and post-production world, or is it you're always looking at a bit of content as a whole and being like, whoa, that was an amazing edit, and then you find out who it was.
I seek out names.
Okay.
There's a lot of times maybe don't know their name before I watch an episode, but definitely will find out after I finish an episode. And I think that there is, those names are escaping me in this moment right now, but yeah, I think that there is an appreciation for, and a lot of those things are like, I kind of keep notes on episodes that have certain things. I think montages are a really cool thing that a lot of shows do really well nowadays.
Yeah.
I mean, have for a while, but there's, I have a whole Google Note thing of just montage, like specific montages that I feel, because it's, you get into a situation where you're doing one and you hit a spot you can't get past, or it's not working. So finding things like that and going back to them.
What makes a good montage, according to Keenan Hiett?
Sort of a 30,000 foot answer here, but I think that the pace, obviously the music in those moments is a big help for whatever you're doing. And I think finding the right song is definitely one of the more enjoyable parts of getting a montage together. But, kind of going back to the feeling side of it, there's just you can watch it 100 times, but you'll know when it gets to where it needs to get. and kind of having there's a little more latitude in those moments to stretch a style of a show. You're not doing just your cutting back and forth and this and that. You can bring in other elements and do a lot of other things. So it's sort of there's a lot of creativity to flex with those. That's a lot of fun, I think.
Do different, like if you've gotten to work on montages for different shows, every show kind of has its own dress code, if you will. Do those dress codes kind of apply to montages as well? Like, I can't go buck wild on this one because
sure, absolutely. I mean, I think some showrunners will give you room to play with that, and some shows are kind of dialed in. Especially, there's a nice thing about working on first season shows where you're establishing all of that stuff. What phone calls look like, what montages, what transitions, you build in the music, all those things are kind of being established early on. So, there's a little more room to play with that stuff in a show that's like in an early run. But it's also kind of nice to have a bit of a guide sometimes in terms of what a show's language is, what their approach to those kinds of things. So it's show specific. It kind of goes, show to show.
The way that you phrased that was interesting. Do you feel like you personally would be a little bit more comfortable getting in on the show on the jump, like season 1, or would you be interested in ever coming into a show for like season 6, where it's like that dress code is baked into the show?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, things are usually a pretty well-oiled machine, and I think that there is probably at times room to play with that a little bit, but it is kind of nice to have it, set. This is straddling the fence as an answer goes, but I really do enjoy. I mean, Reboot was a really cool opportunity to establish a lot of things, and I mean everything really. That part of it, and dialing those things in is a whole other thing beyond just the edit itself.
Sure.
And getting the character of a show together is a really fun undertaking. It's a lot more work. So I like both of those things, I would say, to answer your question.
Sure. They're just different challenges.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I know you're working on some exciting projects that you can't talk about, but is there anything that's exciting that is coming up that people who are listening and they want to check out your work, new stuff? Is there anything you can say that you're working on?
So yeah, I would say there's a season 1 show called Chad that was on TBS that got canceled the day it was meant to air season 2. And part of the Warner Brother
the hack slash
they did. So Chad found a home on Roku, another found life
another
somewhere else.
Okay.
And it's just a really wonderful little world to kind of get lost in. Chad is a very unique character, and it's a very it's a lot of fun. It's a surprise, I feel like.
Oh, dude. So now here's the killer question. Because the show is on TBS, which is a network, and now it's on Roku, which is a streaming service, did the editing style change in between season 1 and season 2?
No, actually, the show was actually TBS produced and meant to air the show. So when we were making it was headed to TBS.
Gotcha. Okay.
What I don't know is that I'm 18 months to 2 years removed from having worked on it.
Right. Wow.
I think that sounds right. Yeah. So I don't know what's happened to it since. In theory, they've kept it all intact, but once they acquire it, it's theirs to
do with.
Yeah. So it could be a whole new show to watch for me too. But all the same, it's a great show. Underrated.
Interesting.
You like editing because it's solving puzzles. Have you ever been presented with a situation where you had to re-edit something that you had already cut because the ask was a different ask than what you put together in the edit? And if so, what was it like solving your own puzzle that you created for yourself?
I mean, I don't know if this directly answers, but we were talking about montages. There is, there have been multiple times where we have gone through the process of an episode and a montage has lived with a certain song through that duration. And then we get to a point where we're getting close to locking and our music supervisor gets a hold of it and says, okay, so you can have this, but it's going to cost X amount of dollars. And that's going to triple your music budget for the entire season. So we can't have this song. Whatever the reason, you can't have this song.
Yeah.
So then you have to go back and, they'll give you alt songs to work in and see if they can kind of find something comparable that fits it. But no matter what song you're changing to, you're going to be changing your edit. And so there are things that you kind of get attached to within a montage or within a specific sequence that you don't want to lose, but you have to then rework now because the rhythms and pacings of whatever song you're bringing in is now a different vibe than what you had before. So it's sort of finding ways to salvage the moments that you had, but packaging them up differently. And it's, the nice thing about editing, or the fun thing about editing, is you can give it to two editors and get completely different, results on that kind of
vastly different.
Right. And I think the nice thing about what I miss sometimes about being in an office is the collaboration side of editing is really where it's kind of made, where shows are made. So having people that you can sit with and kind of bounce things off of, and their take on things, is always kind of a nice checks and balances. It's a nice way to collaborate and work on things.
I've long maintained, and now I'm delighted to actually confirm, talking to you, like, being an editor is a very specific breed of people. Like, I do think you can teach editing, but it also requires a very specific skill set. And you've talked about, like, you like solving puzzles and you have this kind of gut feeling. I do feel like it's a particular breed of a person who can be a great editor like you are. If, for anybody listening to this show who has heard you speak and is really inspired to want to get into editing, how would you send the elevator back down? Like, what would your advice be for anyone who wants to get into, whether it's television or if it's just any type of filmed entertainment, documentaries, TV, movies? What would be the best skill set that people could work on? And then what would be your advice in terms of, like, here's how you get your foot in the door?
Sure. I think, this is kind of a general answer to that question, but practice is the best.
Volunteer to do like free gigs for your director buddies or something?
For sure. I mean, if that's where you're at early on, but it's, even taking a job where it's not necessarily where you want to end up, but it is, if it's working commercials, music videos, shorter format, things like that, you're still working, you're still building connections and stuff from there. But I think, especially with more narrative things, the more exposure you get to those environments, the more immersive you can get with the production side of things. School is great. School is, you can learn a lot of things there, but the bulk of what I have learned has been in the edit base.
Sure.
And so as much as you can be on Avid, Premiere, whatever, do that, because it's, the functionality within the tools we have is a very important side of it. But just getting exposure to whichever medium you're trying to end up in is really
Sure. And is there, if people are skimming, websites or whatever for like postings online, obviously because being an editor is kind of it's an artistry job, but it's also kind of a craftsman's like tool type job. Is there what is the most common entry level position that you're aware of that it's like, this is the job that can then get you to assistant editor, that could get you to editor? What would be the most common edit room job that you'd find on like LinkedIn or whatever?
Start as a post PA?
Post PA is a good route. Yeah.
Post PA, okay.
I've worked with a number of post PAs that are now assistant editors. Some of them are editing. There's definitely a track there. But I mean, there's not a clear and descript way in with a lot of this stuff, as we all know. Being out here, it's kind of, there's opportunities that come along through connections that, you just kind of got to be ready for at any given time. And I think that getting too focused or getting to one track about how you're getting up, there needs to be a little bit of wiggle room. There needs to be patience and flexibility with it all. But just being, even if it is a post PA, being in the room is a helpful thing. There's a lot to be learned from that level all the way up.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Keenan, thank you again so much for really taking time out of your busy schedule to come talk to us. This was interesting, and I think it was enlightening. I don't think I could be an editor, but now I kind of want to try. Maybe I'll get a job as a post PA. We'll see. Keenan, thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate
it. Cheers.
Big old cheers.
Thank you again to our sponsor, The Muse Rooms.
Be sure and check them out at The Muse Rooms, www.themuserooms.com. That's MUSE. rooms.com. You can also find us on Instagram at 2drinkmaximum. That's TWODRINKMI. No, MAXIMUM. Did I spell that right? Maximum.
See, I don't know. This is why I don't spell. This is why you're the official speller of the show.
I'm the worst speller in the world. So that is a terrible idea. That's me.
Yeah.
But thank you again, Keenan, for joining us today. And we will catch you on the next one.
Cheers, everybody.